Hi everyone. As we enter 2026, I want to do something different this time. I wanted to take a moment to reflect on some of the books I read this year. There has been a couple of people also requesting some book recommendations, and maybe this can be useful for them as well. So we have fiction and non-fiction, classics and modern books. So if you're looking for some book recommendations before the start of the new year and want to see which books to pick up, you may find this video useful. So without further ado, let's start. Perhaps it's best to start with The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy, as I find it highly relevant for personal development if you are going through some personal reflections before the end of the year. So this short book is a story of a successful and respectful judge, Ivan Ilyich, who catches a mysterious illness and starts questioning his life and whether he has lived a fulfilled life. So from the perspective of the society, it seems like Ivan did everything right. So he had a good income, a respectful career, a proper family, and social status within society without much scandals. So by society's standards, his life was a success story. No scandals, just a life of a man who knew how to go ahead in life and get the right promotions, talk to right people, and get the right connections. But as he approached death after having this sudden illness, he realizes something disturbing. All of that wasn't enough for a fulfilled life. His illness slowly turns him into a burden for others, including his own family. So people around him start pitying him, but only in a very superficial way. Life continues, conversations continue, dinner tables are still set in with the people and friends and family, and Ivan starts to feel strong resentment towards it. He realizes that he spent his entire life chasing approval, respect, and appearances without ever noticing that time was running out. He thought he was going upward in society's eyes, while inwardly, his life was actually going downhill. So at some point during his sickness, this falsehood by others becomes even unbearable to him. Doctors start talking to him in an abstract, theoretical language as if he were like a case study, not a dying human being. People perform concern just out of politeness and courtesy, but they remain emotionally very distant. What makes this, I think, especially painful for the main character, Ivan, is that he recognizes himself in all of it. Because, in a way, these are the same false manners and social rituals he himself cultivated throughout his life. And interestingly, he remembers his childhood and starts thinking that he betrayed the curiosity, honesty, and liveliness of his childhood. He realizes that time has been running out slowly and it is just too late to make any changes just because of the sickness. I think this segment from the book, this passage captures his slow resentment beautifully. When I am not, what will there be? There will be nothing. Then where shall I be when I am no more? Can this be dying? No, I don't want to. He jumped up and tried to light the candle, felt for it with trembling hands, dropped the candle and candlestick on the floor, and fell back on his pillow. What is the use? It makes no difference, he said to himself, staring with wide open eyes into the darkness. Death. Yes, death. And none of them knows or wishes to know it, and they have no pity for me. Now they're playing. It is all the same to them. But they will die too, fools. I first and they later. But it will be the same for them. And now they are merry, the beasts. Anger choked him, and he was agonizingly, unbearably miserable. It is impossible that all men have been doomed to suffer this awful horror. So I think as we enter 2026, this book serves kind of a reminder, at least for me, that you will be forgotten sooner than you think after you die. A few centuries from now on, completely erased from everybody's memory. So you might as well start living your life now in alignment with your values. Ivan realized this, I think, very late, and that was his tragedy. For me, this book, I think I am going to rate also all the books that I'm going to talk about today. I would rate this book basically 10 out of 10. This was the first book from Tolstoy that I have read. Before I've read a lot of Dostoevsky in my teenage years and in my early 20s, but I always felt like I was kind of missing something by leaving out Tolstoy. And now with this book, being done, I'm looking forward to reading War and Peace and maybe Anna Karenina in the future. Okay, moving on. Next, we have The Trial by Franz Kafka. So I promise not all of these books are pessimistic, moody, right before the start of the new year, new plans. Bear with me, we have some interesting other types of books as well. But now let's talk a little bit more about Franz Kafka and his book Trial. So Trial is the story of a man named Joseph K., who suddenly wakes up one morning surrounded by police officers. They inform him that he is under arrest. But it is also objectively absurd because no one can explain why. No one knows what crime he committed. And even at the beginning, when you are reading it, it comes across as a kind of a funny thing, funny story where people just treat this as a normal thing. You know, you just wake up and you're under arrest and you don't know why. No one knows why. The good news is that Joseph is allowed to go about his normal life. So he can work, move freely, and live as usual. But at the same time, he must attend legal proceedings related to his case. So, but what is the case? So no one has any idea. So that's a funny part about the book. Everything about the process is impersonal. Everything is very professional, taken to its extreme. Joseph can't complain because he doesn't even know whom to blame about this process. Everyone just takes it for granted that this is how it works. The system is so efficient that no single person actually understands what's happening. System takes care of it. So the system is without any emotion, but all the emotions, anxiety, fear, and self-doubt are pushed into Joseph himself, who slowly loses his soul in the process. The very nature of the system makes you comply and hope for the best while slowly you lose your humanity. Joseph is encouraged to rely on lawyers, so people who supposedly understand how things work. But in reality, these lawyers just benefit out of this endless process. For example, his lawyer, supposedly very experienced man, constantly tells him not to worry about anything but to trust him. But actually, nothing is really happening in the meanwhile. The process continues indefinitely. I think this book is a strong criticism of the idea, especially in the early 20th century, that as bureaucracy and systems develop with professional rules and regulations, fairness would naturally follow. For example, you have the famous theory of bureaucracy developed by Max Weber around the same time that Kafka lived. So this idea really advocated for this rational and efficient system. Kafka shows how this idea can fail if it is taken to its extremes. Everything is professional, nothing is impersonal, everything is business, but it crushes the individual soul. One maybe interesting fact about this book is that Kafka never intended all of his books, including this one, to be published. He left explicit instructions for his friends to destroy all of his work after his death. Instead, lucky for us, the friend chose to publish them. So this novel exists almost against its author's will, because this book was never intended to be published. And this also makes you wonder how many writers, authors that we don't know just because they might have destroyed their life's work. About the rating, for me, The Trial is 9 out of 10. Very interesting and reflective book. I'll recommend it. Moving on. Next is nonfiction, something that everyone talks about these days. Everyone, non-technical, technical, non-philosophical, philosophical, everyone, it's in everyone's mind and mouth today. Of course, it's about AI. Book is called AI, Unexplainable, Unpredictable, and Uncontrollable. So this is a special one for me because I actually interviewed the author Roman Yampolskiy 3 months ago. The interview is on the channel, so you can go and check it out if you're interested. So I wanted to read this book because I was interested in AI and AI safety concerns. But then again, that's why I also want to talk to Roman. And therefore, I had to read this book before talking to Roman. And I wanted to talk to Roman because I was interested in this topic. So it's a kind of weird loop why I ended up reading this. So today everyone talks about AI and AI safety, but I wanted to have some deeper understanding of it beyond the surface level fears, such as AI is coming to dominate the world and we are all doomed, these kinds of ideas. So I wanted to go deeper, technical understanding of this concept. So this book basically unpacks 3 core ideas that you also see in the title unexplainable, unpredictable, and uncontrollable. So let's define what do those terms mean in this context of this book without much spoilers. So first, let's start with unexplainable. The idea here is that we may not be able to fully comprehend the decisions made by other intelligent systems. So that's the unexplainable part about AI. Second, unpredictable. So what's so unpredictable about AI? Even if we know the ultimate goal of an intelligent system, we might not know what it will do to achieve that goal. So it's about what means one intelligent system can employ to achieve certain end. So we might agree on an end, but we might not be aligned in terms of what means that intelligent system will employ. So for example, evil is bad. So you give a command to AI to eliminate evil. But then AI discovers that since all humans have the capacity for evil, it might end up deciding that the most efficient solution could be to eliminate all humanity. So the goal is noble, but the method is catastrophic. So that's the unpredictable part. And finally, the third part, uncontrollable. And that's basically the idea that you cannot meaningfully control an intelligent agent that is smarter than you. For example, chimpanzees cannot influence human beings, human societies today, not because humans are evil, but because humans are simply more intelligent. So this book is strongly against the belief that intelligence automatically leads to benevolence, something that you hear from techno-utopian people a lot. One point that I found really interesting from the book regarding the so-called AI alignment problem is that solving the AI alignment problem would require solving all of philosophy and ethics first. And we as humans are not doing quite well in that front. And simply hoping that a more intelligent system will figure this out for us does not make much sense. And it's not supported by evidence, according to this book. But here's a minor criticism that I have. I also cannot understand why a more positive outcome, such as everyone literally having their own superintelligence, is not a likely outcome, especially if you follow the recent trends. When we talk about superintelligence, we tend to assume that there will be one single all-knowing agent. I don't fully understand why other outcome where everyone might have access to their own superintelligence is not likely. For example, right now we don't have one single ChatGPT or one single Gemini. We have many identical copies of the same software. Regardless, I think this book is great because it sounds the alarm of in what possible ways AI development can go wrong and how the results might be catastrophic if we don't take it seriously. What I really like about this book also is that it maintains the technical depth. At times, it might not be easy to read, but that's okay because it doesn't compromise on depth just to be accessible, which is sadly, at least for me, is increasingly rare these days. I kind of regret that other scientific books trying to oversimplify and skip the nuances just to sell a lot of copies and be accessible to everyone. Luckily, it doesn't happen here. In this book, you get the technical depth, the full picture. For me, this book is a solid 8 out of 10. Next is Meditations and Principles of Philosophy by René Descartes. So technically, these two are separate books, but in the version that I read, both were combined into a single edition. René Descartes is often described as the father of modern philosophy. Like many people, I only knew him for one phrase before I read this book. I think, therefore I am, which gets so much reused these days, in memes, movies, and everywhere else. And sometimes it gives a wrong impression that that's all the Descartes has done in his life. Just say that we exist and end of the story. And that's why I'm so glad that I read him to destroy this misconception that I had before. You basically realize that that statement is not a conclusion, but an introduction into more confusion. Descartes starts with the idea that he is going to question everything, even his senses. If there is even a single reason to doubt something, he will doubt it. And what he ends up with is this conclusion. The only thing he cannot doubt is that he is a thinking thing. His thoughts are real. That cannot be doubted. There's an interesting analogy here also, which basically says that even if there is someone, some devil that is deceiving you with all this fake reality, they cannot deceive you that you are a thinking thing, that you have thoughts. So imagine, let's say we are inside a simulation right now built by aliens. So they can deceive us in every way, but they cannot fake our thoughts. The very idea, the very conception of thinking about something, this subjective experience cannot be faked. From this starting point, Descartes develops his famous mind and body distinction. The mind is a non physical substance, the body is an extension of a physical matter, and the two are, according to Descartes, fundamentally separate. It is also important to remember the title of the book, Meditations on First Philosophy, in which the existence of God and the immortality of the soul are demonstrated. So this full title should give you an idea that the book spends a lot of time everywhere trying to prove God's existence. For me, what is really interesting and fascinating here is not necessarily the arguments he lays out, but the historical significance of this method. The idea of trying to prove God using rationality and logic was kind of an innovation for its time. Descartes was saying that, great, we got Bible and church and everything, but actually I want to prove God using rational thinking. And this is what makes Descartes feel so modern. Because this idea implies a deep belief and optimism in the human capacity to understand reality through reason rather than relying purely on external authority like the church. And it is no coincidence that the scientific revolution followed soon after Descartes' life. Another cool thing about Descartes is that he was also a well-known mathematician and actually came up with the Cartesian coordinate system that we all used in high school algebra classes. Such a cool name, Cartesian. I think this is a Latin version of his name. He was a Frenchman. So the book is also full of great aphorisms and quotes. At times, it's not really easy to read, and that's fine. One quote, one passage that I really love from this book is that I realized that if I wanted to establish anything in the sciences that was stable and likely to last, I needed once in my life to demolish everything completely and start again from the foundations. And you can kind of guess why he starts doubting everything at the beginning of meditations after you read this passage. As regards to rating, this book is 10 out of 10. Moving on to the next one. Next is Being You, a New Science of Consciousness. That's another special one for me because it is written by Anil Seth, and I actually interviewed him very recently. Check out the episode in the channel if you're interested. He approaches consciousness from a physicalist perspective. So based on this understanding, consciousness is not something separate from the body, but something that arises from it. So this is very distinct from what Descartes argued with his mind and body dualism. One of the key distinctions Anil makes is between what's often called the hard problem of consciousness and what he refers to as the real problem of consciousness. Instead of focusing on why subjective experience exists at all, he focuses on how perception, selfhood, and experience are constructed. One of the really interesting ideas in the book is that reality is a controlled hallucination. So we also talked about this in great length in the podcast. It's also greatly explained in the book itself. When I came across at this idea first, I was kind of dismissive of it as kind of an idea that rejects the reality. But as I read it more, it kind of made sense in theory. Hallucination in this framework is simply the idea that the brain is not passively reading data from the outside. It also constructs experience by combining necessary input from outside world with prior expectations and predictions. It's important to also clarify here that Anil does not argue that the physical world doesn't exist. It kind of means that what we experience is a model of the world as useful for the evolutionary needs for survival, not the world itself. On the topic of the free will, and this is also what we discuss in the podcast, he argues that the traditional debate between determinism and free will is largely unproductive. Some things are clearly determined. For example, you cannot decide your parents, your culture, and how they influence you throughout the life. You might be able to change it to some extent, but full reset is very difficult and highly unlikely. But within certain contexts, we have meaningful degrees of freedom. If Descartes would say that mind and body are separate, What Anil would say is that we just have a body, and what we call mind or thought originate from there. This is a great book, but what I personally regret is that it largely avoids the why of consciousness, if you know what I mean. At the beginning, before I started reading the book, I was hoping for a discussion of why there is a subjective experience at all, maybe using some new understanding of the science, if there is any, to explain this phenomenon. Why there is the feeling of being rather than nothing. Instead, that question is mostly omitted, and the focus remains on mechanisms throughout the book. So this is not necessarily criticism of his work, but rather my own personal experience that I would have preferred to see that much more. So it's more about your taste and what you prefer and what you want to read about, whether you like to, you want to see this included in the work or not. I'm going to rate this one 8 out of 10. Moving on, next we have Plato's Republic. Yay! Original philosopher. So I had to read this book ever since I saw that quote by Alfred North Whitehead, who said that all of the Western philosophy is basically a footnote to Plato. And once you engage seriously with the Republic, you understand why, what does that mean. At its core, the book is actually about justice rather than politics. It begins with one of Socrates' colleagues claiming that justice is simply the advantage of the strong. So whoever holds power gets to decide what counts as justice. From then on, Socrates begins a very long dialogue to disprove that claim and push that claim to its limits. Then Socrates starts outlining in very theoretical terms the conditions required for a truly just life and a just society. This is where Socrates ends up describing that ultimate utopia. Children are raised communally, poetry and certain forms of music are banned because they argue that it corrupts the soul. People treat one another as brothers and sisters because no one knows who their biological parents are. And apparently that solves the problem apparently that builds the trust between people. So even if you do not agree with Plato and at times, like me, find some of these arguments too idealistic and unpractical, it is very satisfying to read about rationalization and flow of the logic. So if you want to think about justice, power, education, music, emotions, and social order, this is a great book. What makes it really interesting is that it is done via dialogue. The entire book is basically a dialogue between Socrates and those who disagree with him. Socrates is constantly engaging others, questioning them, and exposing contradictions in their thinking. For me, The Republic is not a book to necessarily agree with, but a book to wrestle with. Overall, I would give it a 7 out of 10. Essential reading if you're interested in philosophy. And finally, Aristotle's Politics. I feel like I shouldn't talk about this since I made 18-part series, but I think the book is so beautiful that it would be shame to not include this in the reflection video. If Plato's Republic feels like going very deep into questions of justice, Aristotle's Politics feels more like taking a breath and saying, let's slow down a bit and first understand human nature and human communities in a more systematic way. So politics is less of a philosophical deep dive and more of a structured, almost scientific treatment of political life. Aristotle famously says that man is by nature a political animal. What is meant by this is that it is in human beings' nature to establish first households, get together, basically, marry, make kids, establish households, then villages, and then cities, because we want to be self-sufficient. Given everyone is good at different things, Aristotle treats the city almost scientifically proven to be the ultimate end of human needs, human ends. What is really interesting about this book is that it feels still relevant today and goes to say that in many ways human nature hasn't changed much. Aristotle wrote this work during a time of great geopolitical uncertainty near the end of the flourishing of ancient Greek civilization. What followed was the rise of Alexander the Great and the fragmentation of the ancient Greek world. And then we also had the rise of Roman Empire. Because of that, this book was in a sense lost to history for a long time. As a work of ideas, this is a 10 out of 10, no question. And if you want to go deeper in Aristotle's Politics, check out my series. I did 18-part series about this book, summarizing main ideas and also providing my own commentary. That is all for today. I hope that this will inspire to read more. And let me know in the comments what you're planning to read in the next year. I might do more of these series later, perhaps in the new year. We'll see. Wish you all a happy new year. There will be more episodes, solo episodes, and more conversations with guests across philosophy, psychology, history, consciousness, AI, technology. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe on YouTube or follow and leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can find this show on all major platforms, and for daily content, follow me on Instagram at philosophy.everyday. Until next time, then, bye.